The idea of Slowways is that it is creating tools that will allow and encourage and sort of be the catalyst in getting more people to think about more ways in which they can walk to more places, walking further as well. Sometimes we think of it as being, we're probably not trying to get people to do the kind of couch to 5K. We're probably trying to get people to do the 5K to 15K.
Welcome back to HeadRightOut. My name is Zoe Langley-Wathen, and I am just so delighted to be back here again with you. It feels like it's been forever. I have had a break for a while. I am still juggling some personal family situations. I've been needed on so many different levels and have valued this time with my family and the time away from editing the podcast. It's still my passion. And it still inspires me each time I talk to another amazing woman for HeadRightOut. But I know I have to give myself space to handle the important life stuff and be there for those that I love. It's that thing. It's family first, always. So thank you for understanding and still being here with me despite the gap. Now, I have some good news for those of you who haven't been following along on social media. HeadRightOut took the runner-up award for the Best Health and Wellbeing Podcast in the Podcasting for Business Awards 2022. That was back on the 3rd of March. I was utterly floored. As HeadRightOut is such a new show, I didn't expect this. It was just a great experience, and just to be shortlisted was enough. And in addition, the show also came in at number 13 in the top 20 of the listener's choice. So thank you to everyone who voted, everyone who listens and supports me. And thank you to all the incredible women who have talked with me and shared their experiences for me to share with you on HeadRightOut. Without their honesty and willingness to open up to me, HeadRightOut wouldn't exist. And I must say a big thank you here too to Mike, my husband, who is my biggest fan and supports me through all of the times when I'm banging my head against the side of the boat because my editing isn't going well or the internet connection's dropped out. So yes, Mike, thank you so much too. Okay, today's conversation is with Hannah Engelkamp, otherwise known as Seaside Donkey on social media. There will be a second episode with Hannah in a few weeks' time, as we had so much to cover and I wanted to really keep the 2 episodes focused. Today we touch on her adventure around Wales with her donkey, Chico. We also talk about her life since the arrival of children, including how they dealt with the difficulties, I guess, that were brought up because of the pandemic. But our main focus is about Slowways, a new organisation that Hannah works for, who are on a wonderful mission to create a web of walking routes all over Great Britain. Let's go and find out more. Welcome back to HeadRightOut, everybody. And I am so excited that today we are going to be having a conversation with a friend and fellow adventurer, Hannah Engelkamp. Now, Hannah is a writer and editor with a background in adventure magazines and websites. Her great love is slow, resourceful, human-powered home travel. And she launched the positive environmentalist magazine, The Outdoor Adventure Guide, to wax lyrical about just that. In 2013, she bought a handsome and opinionated donkey called Chico and walked 1,000 miles around the circumference of Wales. And she tells me that the adventure was surprisingly tough. It took twice as long as she'd intended, and I think that generally happens for a lot of adventurers, and was a real learning curve for a woman who, in retrospect, realised that she wasn't really an animal person. Spare a thought for Chico, who Hannah suspects already knew he wasn't a people animal.
Now, thoroughly knackered, she subsequently rolled straight into a hugely ambitious seat of pants crowdfunding campaign. It was very successful, coming in at 25% over budget with 831 funders. And I was one of those funders. They were from all over the world. The book and feature-length film of the walk, called Seaside Donkey, both of them were called Seaside Donkey, were published in 2015. Only a fortnight before her next huge adventure, her first baby was born. So for the last 6 years, Hannah has struggled vigorously with being arrested by motherhood and has found endless similarities between Donkey and Toddler. And we're going to talk to her a little bit about that. Now, eventually, she ploughed all that maternal angst into research and writing for a project on de-domestication of parenthood, rewilding versus farming in a mid-Wales context, and belonging. This project so far includes work published in New Welsh Review, a TEDx talk, a Hay Festival appearance, and 2 extended research events, camping on a hill with children. I love that. And there's a manuscript in progress. The book is funded by the Arts Council of Wales, and it includes a cuckoo as an omnipotent narrator, and it's well on the way, except that Hannah has got waylaid by something else, which we are also going to talk about in a moment. So, Hannah, welcome to HeadRightOut. I am so pleased that you're here to chat with me.
Thanks very much for having me.
So, oh my goodness me, there is so much in there, and I've left a few bits and pieces out because obviously I didn't want to reveal too much in one go, but that was a great snapshot of what you've been doing for the last however many years. I'm just interested to know what your life would be without adventure, because you seem to be such an adventurous spirit, and every time I've talked to you or walked with you or watched you speak, you just appear to be, you are adventure to me. Your spirit just seems to radiate. You radiate.
Oh, well, that's
adventure.
very lovely.
Yes. So please, what would your life be without adventure?
I don't feel like I have done lots of adventures. Like, you must talk to a lot of people who've just got a kind of a global back catalogue of thing after thing after thing. And you yourself set yourself challenges, which are quite bounded, significant things to achieve. And I don't feel like I've really got that. So I guess if I radiate any adventure, it's hopefully just a desire not ever to do things accidentally, not to sort of sleepwalk through things and that kind of thing. So that whatever it is that I am doing, I'm trying to do it in a way that feels as beneficial in various ways. And so often that is basically by making things kind of harder for myself, which I suppose might be a definition of adventurousness.
Well, I was actually going to suggest that because I have a lot of women that say to me, I couldn't possibly talk to you on the podcast because, I haven't done, half the things that some of the women that you talk to have done. And, my story wouldn't be interesting at all. And what I say to them is that actually what you're doing in your everyday life is adventurous. It's not necessarily that you have to go and climb Everest or you have to jump out of a plane. And I know I did jump out of a plane a few months ago, but that was just kind of as a result of lots of people saying that. And I thought, oh, to hell with it, I'm just going to do it. That'll be day 100. But yeah, so I think the sense I get from you is that you just have this adventurous spirit, that you want to seek adventure in your daily life or in the way you approach things, perhaps. I mean, even in the way you write, it might not be happening for you day in, day out, but particularly in the way you write as well, it comes across. Am I barking up the wrong tree there?
No, if anything, I feel like I've got a bit of an aversion to, adventure as a word or a concept, because it does seem to me to be something which can be used to try and differentiate yourself or to plot yourself compared to other people on a scale of adventurousness, with more adventurous being, or, further out of your comfort zone or whatever being preferable. And I kind of find that hard to swallow, partly because it's just, incredibly privileged. Like so many people have to deal with so much stuff that I am never going to have to, hopefully, fingers crossed, never going to have to deal with. And so the very concept of making your life difficult and then crowing about it, I find quite hard to stomach. And certainly with the donkey walk, I didn't want to force people to read a book or watch a film that had any kind of poor me element to it, because I knew this was a series of hardships of my own devising. And I was just, I was really lucky to be able to go and do it. And I feel like the world is very much full of hardships, and I didn't want to add to the sum of those. That makes sense.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
And I know, I mean, a lot of people in this country, you know, you can be sort of financially privileged, but still have traumas or backstories or whatever that you need to use adventure to work your way through, and that's absolutely valid. But I don't really, so I don't want to have to ham up the jeopardy of what I want to do, which is essentially just trying to make my life more enjoyable in order to fit into a mold of adventurer. We got deep all of a sudden, didn't we?
We did. But so did you do the challenge walking with your donkey? Did you do that then because you wanted to go and enjoy yourself and you wanted to do something different, or did you do it because you wanted to challenge yourself?
Well, here I come unstuck a bit, because I did take the donkey, and I think I probably owe it to people to be honest about the fact that, and everyone will know this to be the case anyway, I'm sure they'll have guessed, I took the donkey to draw attention to myself, let's face it.
Yeah.
I was already a writer. I'd already been writing the Outdoor Adventure Guide, which actually I kind of launched a later incarnation of it. It used to be you mentioned in my bio that I launched it, and then I felt bad about that because it did already exist, but it existed as a kind of a international travel supplement sort of a feel. And I launched it as a kind of positive environmentalist staycation-y sort of thing in the UK. It's just a point of order. So I've been writing that mostly about how to, I'd use that as a bit of a sandbox for myself about how to bring adventure into your everyday life, and how with the right attitude towards it, walking the dog was an adventure, and stepping outside your front door was an adventure, and that fitted in for me to a sort of a make do and mend agenda, and an anti-commercial, anti-long haul flight, pro incorporating it into your everyday life version of adventure. So I had already been writing about that for quite a few years, and I obviously in the process of doing that I'd come across all sorts of adventurers doing interesting things, so I had well had in mind that was the sort of thing that was a viable lifestyle choice. And I also, and being a writer, I also thought it'd be quite nice to try to write something about it. And the Wales Coast Path, of course, had just opened up the year that year. So I was writing a little news article about it for the Outdoor Adventure Guide, and thought, actually, no, it wasn't the Outdoor. There was a bit of a time gap. Anyway, I was writing a news article. It was a long time ago, I know, and I'm getting a bit fuzzy. We'll probably get to that in the middle-aged part of this conversation. Yes. So the Wales Coast Path was opening up, and I was writing a news article about it, and I just thought, I was living in London, and Wales is my country where I was born and brought up. And I just thought, actually, I don't really want to be writing a news article about it. I want to be doing it. And then, so I kind of decided to do that. And then I thought, I know, I had this little mini epiphany that if I took a donkey, then people would pay attention and I'd have something to write a book about. Wow. And actually, I was dead right. Yeah. It's not that no one wants to read a book about a woman walking on a footpath, but you do have to have something else, and I don't have a terribly traumatic Raina Wynn style backstory or something to be working through, so I kind of went for the comedy vote instead.
I'm envious. I'm in the process of writing, well, no, actually I've done the writing. I'm in the process of editing now my South West Coast Path story, and yes, I don't have half the story that Raina Wynn produced, obviously, but yes, you've got to make it what it is. And yeah, there's not too much trauma in there. There's a lot of truth, I guess.
I think, and although I send myself up about it, it fitted into my view of the world by the animal kind of exemplified the slowness and the literally but also it harked back to the way these roads were originally used. Often we were walking on green lanes and drovers roads and things, and also people recognised it for what it was straight away in a really gratifying way. So people just saw an animal and a human walking together, and it was like maybe a part of them that was like I don't know, this might be a bit esoteric, but like a ancestral understanding of a person and an animal doing something together, and walking as the kind of correct speed of humanity over the 200,000 years up until the last 50 that we've been around.
I mean, I can understand that, because it would catch my attention, but I wouldn't be shocked by it. I sort of almost expected when I'm on a trail to see people on horseback or with a mule or a donkey. I mean, when I did the Camino, I saw a man walking with it was a couple actually walking with a donkey. So that I can see what you mean about it, perhaps harking back to something in our ancestry. So
and we walked through some places where people had, especially the North Gower in South Wales, we walked through a couple of villages, linked villages, where up until even only 30 years ago, they weren't allowed to have motor vehicles on the estuary, and it's a cockle picking estuary. So in other places, people had to be 60 or 70 or 80 to have the living memory of working with animals. And we did meet those people all the time, which was great. But on the estuary, it was in the living memory of people in their 30s. And that was tangibly, noticeably different, that people would lean out of windows. And people had been really sad when motor vehicles, when tractors and things were allowed to go out on the estuary.
Wow.
And so people rushed up to tell us those stories, which was really gratifying.
Oh, yeah. And to hear that, I would be quite honoured to have a story like that shared with me. I mean, you must have felt, it's like somebody's revealing something to you that means something to them.
I think so. And because working and walking with an animal is something that actually is really, like, I'm not an animal person actually, and so I hadn't seen this coming, but maybe it was probably all the more powerful for that. If you get on with an animal, the two of you are of one mind and of one job, and you communicate with each other on that non-verbal level. That's really deep. And it's something actually that dog owners already know. But I'm not a dog owner. In fact, I've never really had a pet. So it took me by surprise to see how that non-verbal communication can sort of strike at something deeper.
Ooh. So I am really desperate to kind of dig into that deeper, but I want to save this. I want to, I'm going to wrap up the Wales Coast Path / Circumference of Wales story and just tuck it over there to one side for a little bit, because we're going to have a completely separate conversation about that for another episode, because the story of Seaside Donkey and Hannah really does need to have an episode all of its own. So I hope you're okay with that, Hannah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I'm interested to know, you said something a moment ago about having this almost an aversion to the word adventure or adventurer. And I'm just interested to know, what would you label? No, I don't like the word label, but what would you call yourself if not an adventurer, if you had to give yourself a title in that respect? And again, it's not a label, it's not a title, it's just how would you refer to yourself if not an adventurer, bearing in mind some of the things that you have got up to over the years?
Well, obviously, it tickles me on the tummy when people consider me adventurer. Of course, I'm egotistical as the next person. So, it's a bit of a like, oh shuck, don't be silly, I'm not an adventurer, at the same time as then suggesting that I have some big problem with it. So I'm aware of that as well. But then, so many of the things that I've done from that outdoor adventure guide, and then what I was trying to do with the book in making it lighthearted and trying not to suggest that it was something that only I could do because only I had this mettle to, actually do this. I want not to put myself apart from other people, because actually, I think a lot of people couldn't walk around Wales with the donkey, but I think it's the donkey element that was the issue there. I think most people could probably walk around Wales. And a lot of that is not giving yourself the choice. So I think probably that's what sets adventurers apart, is that they just don't give themselves, they make an idea. they come up with an idea and they tell everyone about it, and then they can't get out of it. And then they fulfill it. And I think that that's the kind of core of adventuring, isn't it? And so, I don't know, I'm not coming up with an answer. What would I call myself? The other thing is that I haven't done another grand ostentatious adventure like the donkey walk. For the first few years I was doing the crowdfunding, which was easily as hard as the walk, and then I was writing the book, which was easily as hard as the walk, and then I was finishing the film, which is easily as hard as the walk, and then I had a baby, which was easally as hard as the walk, and then I had a second baby. I was going to say, so actually another one. There's been 5 life events, not 6, since the walk, which were all in a way as hard as the walk. Only it's the walk that is unusual and special.
It's been massive. But have you found that that's filtered into your life with children now? I mean, have you gone off on mini adventures with children, even if it's just like, 2 or 3 days? Have you found that you've tackled things perhaps with the children that you might not have done had you not gone off on the walk around Wales, perhaps?
Actually, the challenge for me has been to try to shelve that. Like, for the first few years, I tried to keep up with that, and I had definitely underestimated, first of all, how much I had a cesarean with my first baby, not intending to have one. And so that was my first experience of physical trauma in a way. I actually suddenly had accessibility issues where I never had before. So that was an interesting, humbling experience. And then I had the accessibility issues of having a small child. And he, it turned out, was extremely opinionated. easily as much as the donkey, and didn't want to go in the carrier and that sort of thing. So over the years, he's 6 now, and it's just, I think to begin with, I felt like I needed to be, I'm sure this is going to resonate with almost every parent. To begin with, I felt like I should just bloody well make him, you know, and that was, I think, an all right thing to do. And then by the time I think you have your second child, or maybe just by the time you get sufficiently tired with the first one, or maybe you just learn, they are the making of you children, not they break you, I think, and then they remake you. And the remade me is much less likely to just go off and do stuff, because it's hard for him. He doesn't want to. He really values all the things that I don't value, which are, he values the kind of stability and certainty and knowing where we're going to be and knowing what we're going to do. And those are all the real antithesis of what I have built my life to particularly enjoy, which is spontaneity and, you know, sleeping wherever we happen to be and not knowing where we're going to sleep when we leave that day. And as with the donkey, I have to appreciate that I'm the one with the power in the relationship between me and my child, as I was the one with the power in the relationship between me and the donkey. And if you're the one with the power, you have to try to recognise that, and to recognise that the powerless party will display some funny behaviour that is only clear in the context of their powerlessness. And for both of those creatures, my son and the donkey, that powerlessness manifested as just really wanting to know where bedtime, you know, where they were going to be sleeping and what we were going to be doing, and knowing in advance, and not being disrupted, and eating the same sorts of things, and not being dragged around the place by me.
Oh my gosh, routine is king.
It is. Yes. It is. And it really hurt. But at the same time, both donkey and son taught me a lot of things that were wrong, potentially wrong, because my idea of what it was nice to do. So I had been writing about well-being, of being outdoors and being in the moment and being, you know, at one with nature, yada yada. And actually what I wanted to do was distances and summits and challenges and that kind of thing. And both the donkey and the baby couldn't care less. In fact, were actively adverse to anything that was about deferred gratification or getting somewhere other than we were right now. And both of them had a really honest appreciation of the moment and dwell in their moment. And so I had a couple of years, the first couple of years of parenting, I really had to delve into, I wasn't really enjoying being a parent particularly. I think my son was kind of particularly hard work as well. Now that I've got a daughter, I can reevaluate that one a little bit. I definitely didn't make it easier for him or for myself either. And I set myself these sort of mini artistic challenges to try to go out with my son and let him guide me around the small outdoors, hedgerows, you know, puddles, and sitting by a stream and throwing stones into it. You know, I'm happy to sit by a stream and throw stones into it for about 30 seconds, and then I want to do the next thing, whereas he could do it for an hour happily, and or, you know, probably a day. And actually would choose a camping spot. Once we started to cotton onto this, we'd choose a camping spot that had a stream. And
how long did you do that for, Hannah? Or is that just something that's ongoing now?
They're sitting by a stream.
Well, you've started kind of allowing him to be creative with the choice of what you do like that.
Yeah, I did. And now he's 6. I realised that we're coming out of the other end, and that was a small stage. And there's some really sad things about that, about him starting to lose that. So I really make an effort at the moment to try and leave the house occasionally without having somewhere that we're going to go. And that's quite difficult, because actually to get everyone to get their clothes on, you need to be able to give them something. You know, you have to say, come on, we're going to go to the park, or let's go get an ice cream, or go to the beach. And I try just to leave the house sometimes with both children without a plan of where we're going to go. Or even if we do have a plan, we don't stay in the playground for very long, and then we go off wandering around the castle ruins and, you know, around the place, just so that they have a little bit of a sense of exploration. We live in town, we don't have a garden, but that we can have a bit of a sense of exploration of our space. And
that is adventure, isn't it? That is a different form of adventure to what you're used to, but it is adventure nonetheless, because you haven't necessarily planned something. You know, each day can be different. Sometimes it's a challenge. Sometimes you're having to think on your feet, find a solution to how you're going to do something. Sometimes you're thrown in at the deep end, and it's like, But yeah, quite often I'm the one who wants to go for, you know, cake somewhere, and they don't really, you know, they're happy with much higher level of physical discomfort than me. They're happy to be, I'll find out after a few hours that both of them have been wet through on the inside,
and didn't care because they were so enjoying whatever thing we were doing, which is lovely.
How was your time through COVID, Hannah? I'm just thinking, you're in a town, you don't have a garden. What was the pandemic for you?
It was rough. I'd just got to the point, so they were just 1 and just 3. And I had just got to the point so when the little one was only 4 months, we went and were wardens of Bardsey Island at the end of the Llŷn Peninsula in North Wales for 6 months. And that was nice and adventurous. I kind of thought to myself, well, Tally, my little one, is going to take up all of my time for this period anyway, so we might as well go and live somewhere. I was determined to give myself a bit more of a buffer than I had my little boy, because I wanted to carry on doing work straight after. I had that thing of like, oh, it's not going to change me at all, I'm sure it'll be fine. And then with my little girl, I thought, well, actually this time I'm going to try and give it its due and relax into it. So we went to, it just so happened that Bardsey Island suddenly didn't have a warden because their previous wardens had to leave at very short notice, and we were able to, being freelance, and me being on a kind of freelance maternity period, we were able just to go and do it. And so that was interesting because it's completely off-grid, the island. It's a kind of a pilgrimage site which is across a famously rough sound and hard to get to, and we were wardens, so we were looking after the 10 holiday homes, kind of historical heritage holiday homes, that they've all got open fires and no electricity, and it was really interesting. So we had to do a lot of speed cleaning those on a Saturday with changeovers, and then a lot of the rest of the time was hanging around with the children, baking our own bread and going to buy eggs from the farm and that sort of thing. There was only 2 farmers and us, and then a bird observatory there, and then the rest were guests coming and going.
And so, so
that was interesting.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that is massively adventurous. I'm sat here kind of almost open mouth thinking, my gosh, you've just said you haven't done anything else.
Yeah, I forgot about
interesting. It's like, wow, no, that is mega. And so did you go off back onto the mainland to get supplies once a week or something? How did you manage that?
We ate up the things that other people had left sometimes, so that bolstered things. And the farm, we did eat a lot of eggs from the farm, and we bought flour by 20 kilos at a time or something, and made a lot of cakes. And then once a month or so, or maybe even less, we'd get a Tesco delivery to the mainland and let the boatman know, and he'd bring the delivery over.
Oh, so you didn't go back, they brought it over to you. But oh, how wonderful.
Yeah, and so that at first I couldn't understand how we could possibly live without all the, especially with little children, you know what they're going to eat, and it's mostly blueberries. And how are we going to cope without our Peruvian blueberries or whatever, which is absurd in itself, isn't it? I mean, honestly, what am I, an emperor or something? Command blueberries from Peru. And so that was a really nice thing about it, was that the blueberries, after a shop, the blueberries and the avocados would be gone within a couple of days. And then we would be back to baking our own cakes and flapjacks and making a lot of pancakes. There were bees on the island, and the former farmer came back to deal. He'd been the bee man, and he came back to deal with a swarm that had set up in a stone wall. And then as he was leaving, he dumped a bin bag full of chunks of honeycomb and chunks of stone wall on our front door, with instructions not to leave any of it out because the bees would find it. So I spent several nights kind of milking the honey and sieving out the stone wall, and that was really nice as well. So some things we were really rich in, and those things were, the things that there was some sense to the food and the eating. It was the things that actually were being created by the island.
So what expectations did you go over there with? What experience did you come back with that were different to those expectations then?
I realised that I'd mentioned Bardsey just as an aside, answering a different question of yours, which was to do with learning from children, I think. And what age? Oh, and COVID, that was it.
COVID is
so yes. So we came back from that, and I had a couple of months of deciding to take it easy, I think, before getting back into work. And my little boy had his tonsils out, and then I gave that due amount of time, which I never would have done in the past. That's the sort of thing I would have scheduled into an afternoon and be like, okay, back to work the next day. And so that felt kind of positive. I had 2 children now, and I was going to try and take things a little bit more easily. And I mean, Bardsey was incredibly busy, but I mean, we ran music nights and all of that sort of thing, which was great. And we were very visible and very, there, met all the visitors, and they all had their own things going on. And we had art classes and all of that sort of stuff. So it was super busy, but it was rather more in the moment than other things. We had a bit of internet, but, not very much. And it was lovely about it. And so when we came back, I was kind of determined to re-enter gently. And then my little boy went to school in the January, and I was really glad about that. And I'd probably lined my mum up to look after my little girl a couple of days a week or something like that, so I could start to get back into work. And Oshan, my little boy, was in school for about 3 weeks or 4 weeks or something before COVID closed the schools. So actually what happened was I was just starting to get that sense of myself as I really, really, really like working. I'm lucky to really like the things that I do, and I'm lucky to be able to do the things that I like. And I'm freelance and sort of always have prioritized low living costs, I guess, so as to be able to not feel beholden to having, we don't own a house and we don't have a mortgage, so we don't have big loans and things. So we have always tried to be able to pick and choose. So that's always been good. So I was really looking forward to getting back to work and having a bit less time with the children, because I didn't feel like a natural stay-at-home mum particularly. And then we had these 3 weeks and then we were straight back into it. So actually COVID just felt incredibly familiar, and I just felt really crestfallen. It just felt like exactly more of the same. But it meant that we were very well versed in how to find little hedgerows and undergrowth and things. And we got famously turfed off the beach in Aberystwyth once on, I think it must have been like Easter Sunday, when they had just brought in lockdown. And we were on the beach and the children were too, I couldn't walk with both children on the beach. And so we had to sit, and we didn't have a garden. So we just had to be outdoors because they're both very high energy children. And we got thrown off the beach by a policeman, and I mentioned it on Instagram, and everybody really latched onto it as being just this appalling thing. But actually, in retrospect, there were plenty of places that we could have gone and hidden that were a bit less in your face. We were probably being a bit provocative being actually on the beach, and it never happened again.
That is still your front garden, isn't it?
It is our front garden.
As far as the children are concerned, that's your front garden. And it's very hard to just stop doing that when they're used to doing that, particularly your son, because he's older and has more of a sense about what you tend to do and what you don't do. And
he's just extremely high energy, and so we didn't stick to the 1 hour ever, but we did go and jump into fields and kind of have safaris around the field. We kind of found it quite easy to spend 6 hours in one small field. A little bit of paddling in a boggy bit over here, and then sword fighting with sticks over here, and then a lot of picnics. We all bond over picnics. And wow. It's the sort of thing. I think with the whole of parenting, it's the sort of thing that I probably look back on quite fondly and betray myself of the time by thinking of it as being quite a nice period. It was really hard. Yeah,
it's tough at the time. And as midlife women as well, that particularly with young children can be perhaps more difficult for, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but as we get older, our energy levels are perhaps going down and are maybe not as high as somebody who's just had a baby in their 20s. If you've got two children and how old are you, Hannah?
I'm 42.
You're 42, yeah. So you'd have been about 40 then when that was all happening.
Yeah.
But so it's a tricky time, but you've got through it. And like you say, you probably will end up looking back on it with fondness. And
at the time you feel like it's forever. And you feel like it's forever in terms of the years, but it's also forever in terms of the minutes. All of it stretches and expands in ways that you're not used to, I think, when you first have children.
I just, the way I see it is you just seem to have come through that, and every hurdle that you've had to navigate, you have just tackled it with more creativity. You have a creative mind, and you've just managed to work your way through it in a wiggle, but you've got through it. And it's something that you'll all probably look back on fondly later. Now, you've got through all of this in a long, slow way. You've been, as you talked about, the fields, going through the fields on this safari and finding your adventure through the fields. You've moved into another adventure now. And this is something that we skipped earlier in your introduction. But you were working on a book, and we'll come back to the book in a moment. But you were working on the book, and then It was well on the way, but then something else stepped in. Another opportunity arose for you. And that opportunity came about in the form of, over to you.
I now have the total honour and amazing modern kind of tech startup style job title of Culture, Imagination and Story Lead of Slowways, which is fab, isn't it?
So
what a title.
That is amazing. So say that again. It's the culture.
I'm the Culture, Imagination and Story Lead.
That is incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I think I sort of refer to myself as sort of not like the head of editorial, because we're a small team. That suggests a large number of people working under me, but holding up the editorial end of things, really, of Slowways. And I hope that a lot of your listeners might know what Slowways is already, but it's very new, and where the culture and the imagination side, so the stories is going to be a part of the website. That's simple. It's a part of the website that reflects people's stories and tells people's stories in various different ways. And the culture and the imagination part are really exciting, because this is where this new job is about trying to change the landscape, and I'm really excited about this. So in a nutshell, Slowways, for people who don't know, is a network that already exists now of crowdsourced walking routes between every town and city and many of the large villages in the whole of Great Britain. So already you can go to the website and you can plot a way list from your own town or village to any other place in Great Britain along these routes. And at the moment, the routes are kind of invented, because they've been made up by hundreds of volunteers, all sitting on laptops, using, I assume, mapping, so OpenStreetMap and Google Street View and whatever other means that they had, and I suppose sort of Ordnance Survey maps. So you can see where there hasn't been any actual on the ground path making going on. These are all paths that exist, but the idea was to join them all up and create routes so that you could be sure of a route between one place and another. And now this phase at the moment is to test all of those routes. So we're inviting people to go out and test them and review them and amend them, so they're places where they don't actually work, because they are things that have been invented remotely. So it's this big kind of pioneering testing phase as we test this network. But it's all finite. The intention isn't to create more and more and more routes between two villages, but to find one that really feels like the best. And the best is the safest, the most direct, and only later in the list of importance is beauty and things. So the intention is the directness, that it's something that you know that you can actually walk from here to your next town, direct and trusted and safe. So and off-road where possible.
Yes. And does accessibility come into it as well, Hannah?
It does, yeah. So we talk about it as being walking and wheeling.
Okay.
And in this first instance, it's all such an unknown quantity that we certainly wouldn't want to. It's this pioneering phase. So we don't really know what different paths are like until people have walked them and have reviewed them. Once you get 3 positive reviews on one route, that route is then verified and it gets a kind of a snail icon. Our logo is a snail. Slowways, and it gets a snail icon with a tick on it, and then it is verified. And I think we're thinking about, if something gets 3 bad reviews, perhaps that might be its death knell as well. And some routes, of course, just are never going to be very accessible. So some of them are. There's a 60-kilometre route in Scotland that is just, that is the shortest, most direct way between 2 settlements, and it's 60 kilometres, because that's the curve. And then there's plenty of slowways in central London and other cities that are 3 kilometres, or even less sometimes. So there's a big variety of different routes, and that reflects the big variety of different land uses in the UK. Yeah, and I think the idea really is to try to create, this is where the culture and the imagination side of things really appeal to me. The idea is that we have a road network and we have a rail network that you just know what they are. You can trust them. You assume that you will be able to get from anywhere in Great Britain to any other place, certainly on the road network and to some extent on the rail network. And we don't have anything like that for walking. No. Whereas walking actually is how people have always got around. So it's about trying to create that feeling, and that's what changes people's relationship with land, and that's what I think is really exciting. Obviously, it's trusting that there's going to be a route there. It says there's going to be a route there, and then
knowing that that is part of that network from settlement to settlement. Then I have seen, various people on different groups or different social media platforms talking about it. There was one in particular that he just didn't get the point of it. And he said, well, haven't we already got this already? We've got ordnance survey maps. Isn't that what they're for? And it details where all the footpaths and the permissive paths are and the rights of way. But it is different to that, isn't it?
In a way, it's not that different from that. So I've gone on long walks before. I walked with the lovely Ursula Martin, who, if you haven't spoken to yet, you must, because she's in your age bracket too.
Yeah, she has. She has. Yeah, she has, and she wrapped up our season 1, and yes, was very popular.
Well, she and I walked to Hay from Aberystwyth because we were going there both to talk about walking, and we figured what better way to get there than walk there. So we walked across the Cambrian Mountains. Another
adventure. Sorry, just got to say that.
Oh, all right then. So, and to do that, we got our ordnance survey maps and we laid them all out on the floor, and we got a piece of string and we put it down in Aberystwyth and down in Hay, and then we drew with a highlighter pen, we drew the closest footpath. So we created for ourselves between 2 points exactly what Slowways is doing. So yeah, it's not substantially different from what already exists, but I don't think many people necessarily do that already. It's very different what we're creating is a tool that will help people to do what we know that some people already do, but most people just don't think like that.
No.
And so because most people don't think like that, most people, that's a mean thing to say, isn't it? But the idea of the role of going for a walk, I feel, in modern life is either that you go for a walk from your front door and back to your front door, which is probably a short health thing, probably with a dog, or you drive somewhere and do a walk in a beautiful place and then drive home again. Or if you want to go and do a big adventure that really challenges yourself, that you go and you do one that has been, the Wales Coast Path or Coast to Coast or Hadrian's Wall or the West Island Way or South West Coast Path, or something that is in a beautiful place and for the purpose of leisure. And the idea of Slowways is that it is creating tools that will allow and encourage and sort of be the catalyst in getting more people to think about more ways in which they can walk to more places, walking further as well. Sometimes we think of it as being, we're probably not trying to get people to do the kind of couch to 5k. We're probably trying to get people to do the 5k to 15k or 20k or whatever, or the first sleepover and then keep on walking the next day. And to think then of walking as being something that is more purposeful and for more purposes. And it doesn't have to mean you walk to a work appointment or a doctor's appointment, or it's not necessarily about being work or leisure. It's also about recognising all the different reasons that people walk. And loads of those are going to be reasons that you're really familiar with from talking to all these people who have been walking to get over a breakup, or walking to honour the person that they're walking towards, or pilgrimages, or like with Ursula, to try to make sense or to fill her time between, after a cancer diagnosis, to shore up what's left of your sense of identity after a big sudden change of direction and all of that sort of thing. And those all count to me as not exactly leisure, there's more purposes for walking.
Yeah.
And people know them. And I suppose Slowways is about making that things that people maybe talk about in highfalutin philosophical concepts like pilgrimage, actually bringing that down to earth a bit and being like, this is something that
more
you can
accessible.
Do. Yeah.
And I think for me, the difference between Slowways and just using an ordnance survey map, and that's not to say that you shouldn't be using your OS map, because obviously we definitely advocate you should be using your map. But I think for me, the resource is that it's giving you a direct route that has already been verified. So like you said, it saves you having to get out all of these maps and working out with your string how far it's going to be or what direction you should be taking. But also the fact that it's accessible. I mean, how many times have you been on a footpath and you've reached a stile or you've reached a gate to a field and there is absolutely no way through? On the map, the footpath is there, but there's no way through. And, I think it's just having something that says that it's verified. I mean, I'm assuming, will the Slowways routes be updated or monitored in some way?
I mean, we'll carry on with online mapping infrastructure and sort of communication tools and that sort of thing that we have now. We've got a forum and things as well. That will stay. So it will, even when the network is fully verified, it will always the nature of land is that it's always going to have to remain flexible, and that's always going to be something that is done by people trying things and reporting back that when they don't work. So it's never going to be set in stone.
No, that's good.
It will hopefully also be a capacity to feed back to local authorities and encourage, places where it really doesn't work. There's places where the idea is that it's direct. So we've got this straight line map of Great Britain, so where the network is, and the straight lines between everywhere, a bit like the tube map, is not an exact representation of what it is on the ground, and it looks really nice. It's kind of like a cut diamond sort of a thing. And then you can click that off and put on the actual routes, which are all kind of wiggly. And the difference between that's something we can read, is the difference between the straight line and the wiggly line. And if we can then start to feed back to how to make these more direct and join up bits that really don't work, or help people, give local active travel groups and things a bit of grist to their mill to go back to their local authorities and make some changes on the ground as well. So, it's a long project and there's a lot more to do.
Well, and hopefully,
there's a lot more capacity for it.
Loads. And hopefully it's going to help keep some of those public rights of way open that are in danger of closure too, with having so many people out there now. Obviously they were mapping it all in their homes during the pandemic because they couldn't go out and explore, but now we've got that opportunity where they can go out and explore these routes and start verifying. So what's the next stage for this? There's an event coming up, isn't there, that's going to help this? So
we're doing a series of swarms over this year. Swarm, we weren't sure whether to call it swarm because it sounded potentially a little bit maggoty, but we've decided to go heavy in with the bee, the friendly bee.
I like swarm. I think that's great.
It gets the impression of what we want, which is that actually all the time there are people all over the country who are walking and reviewing and testing. This has really caught people's imagination, which is great, and as a thing to do. And there's a lot of solo walkers who just are really taking this on as a bit of a mission, and who are self-organising to get together in groups. And the capacity for this, and the capacity for people to use it as a tool to do longer walks and things as well, and join several together, is really huge. Or to do loops with them, or whatever it is. Somebody described it as being like a national trail from your front door, which I thought was just really nice. And so there's somebody at the moment who's walking from Brighton to New Brighton, with New Brighton is in Merseyside, so that's an immensely long walk, and other walks that aren't set in stone like Land's End to John O'Groats really offer themselves to using this as well. So what's next for us? So there are already people walking all over the place and doing this all the time, and it's really exciting and really gratifying to see on social media. We're the hashtag Slowways on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, and at Slowways UK on all of those three. So every weekend especially, there's people walking every day of the week as well, but every weekend we especially get a kind of pouring in of reviews and downloading of the routes as well. And so that's really nice. And then we thought if we had the swarms, because the original network had been set up on these hack days. The first one was in person, and then because of COVID, subsequent ones were people doing them at home, but they were hack days of people sitting at their laptops and inventing all the routes. And so to get some of that hack day energy into the walking of the routes, we've decided to condense our badgering of people to walk Slowways, our appealing to people to walk Slowways into these days. Appealing. And so we have one next weekend in Leeds, and then we're going to have one in Bristol, one in Scotland, one in Wales, Scotland and Wales to be confirmed exactly where they're going to be, and then one in London, and that'll take us up to Christmas. So they're going to be one every 2 months throughout this year. And on one of the nights of the weekend each time, we're having a get-together in one location as well. So we're inviting people all over the country to do a walk, but if you happen to be somewhere near where we're having a get-together, then that means that we can actually have a bit of tea and cake and celebrate people coming in. And we're going to have a bit of a kind of a totalizer going on the website as well, so we can see the miles ticking up and the routes being ticked off and the snails being bagged and things as well. So that'll get a bit of energy behind it.
So just to clarify then, this coming weekend on Saturday, is that the 28th?
It's the 26th. We're counting Friday as well for people who want long weekends. So for the 25th, 26th, 27th, Friday, Saturday and Sunday coming up, we are inviting people to walk and put things on social media and hashtag So we'll see what people are doing. Also, we have 2 filmmakers who are going to be walking slowways and then receiving people's films. So anybody who does do a walk, if they do a kind of a selfie of themselves in the most beautiful place or the most awful place and their sort of finish line, or if they're in a group, a kind of a group selfie or a slow 360 panorama, and send that in to us, then they'll be incorporated in the film as well, which will be really nice.
So do they send that to Slowways?
Yeah, we've got a Google form that people can fill in to do that. So if they go on the Slowways website, which is slowways.org, and we've got a page called National Swarm, which we'll also put links all over the social media for it as well. And on there, there'll be a link to the form to send things in.
I'll make sure I put these really links in the show notes as well.
That'd be brilliant.
That people can access
Great.
that.
And people can do, some people will want to do something ostentatious because why not? Yeah. So some people might want to do some really long ones. If anyone wants to knock off that 60-kilometre one in Scotland, we'd be delighted because we all feel that one hanging over us. At some point, one of us is going to have to go and do it if nobody else does. But equally, there's loads of short ones. And the nature of them is that they join up really well with public transport, of course, because they go from settlement to settlement. So you could easily do a kind of a ring of 3 or 5 kilometre ones in a city centre, or do one and then get back by train or whatever. So they don't have to be hardcore at all.
This is so appealing, and everything that you have been explaining, Hannah, it can appeal to anybody, can't it? It can appeal to the hardcore adventurer who wants to go off and do something long, or it can be, as you say, it can be somebody who maybe has only got a couple of hours to spare or a day to spare just to walk, say, 5 miles or 12 miles, depending on where they are and what time they've got, what commitments they have. And I think that's the key about all of this, isn't it? It's relevant to anybody.
Yeah, it really is. So, you have that question sometimes of what will success look like? And for me, success will be if and when, or maybe it's already happening, people start to integrate. Some people already do it, of course, for various reasons and often not on purpose. But if you can integrate walking with real life, so it's not a out of real life thing that you just do for leisure, that's really lovely and valid. I think a lot of people do that already. But if it can be something where you think, well, I'm going to so-and-so place because I've got to, drop the car off for an MOT, or, all the reasons why you might do one journey and you'd normally just come straight back again. But maybe to think, well, actually, that is my day off, or perhaps I could walk somewhere to meet somebody and then go back again. And it's just going to be a nicer journey because it's a walk rather than a difficult drive or whatever it is. Just to start to think about walking as something that can be integrated and therefore enrich all areas of life, I think
that was something that Ursula had off to a T, wasn't it? She would walk to her appointments and walk, when she didn't have a car, she was either walking places or hitching places. And so you and Ursula did that when you walked from Aberystwyth to Hay. And I think Anna McNuff has done it. In fact, she cycled, but that's still a slower way than travelling by car or by train. She's gone to somewhere in Europe because she's speaking there and she's decided to cycle there from her home. And I love this idea that a lot of people now are starting to take more as a natural just a natural progression through their lives, that they can do this. We don't all have to jump on a train or get in our car to go places. I know a lot of us do have to, but, it's just something else for us to consider.
Well, deep down, there's something a bit subversive and, potentially radical about it, which is that it encourages people to think of time not as money. Yes. For the pockets that you're able to do that in, there's something a little bit sort of anti-capitalist about it, which is what I like about it, which is that we're so encouraged to think that time is money. And a lot of people won't be able to fit this, or especially people with hard manual jobs or, really early morning cleaning jobs, or jam-packed in picking up the children and then getting to a twilight job. It's really important to me that this isn't a middle-class leisure tool or a middle-class leisure message. And that's going to be a lot of the work of the next few years, is because it's such a new organisation. We're just working out who we're talking to and how we put all these things across. But I think if it can be that you can recognise in your life the places, the things that make you happy, and how that you can expand those and diminish the things that don't make you happy. So let's say you've got a grim commute where you always get stuck, but you sit in the car at the same time, and COVID sort of has had a useful scumbling effect on all of this, hasn't it? But if you had a commute that wasn't very long, but is always horrible because everyone else is commuting at the same time, and you get home and then you sit home and you think, oh, I don't know quite what to do next for a little while, and you just sit and you look at your phone, or, you know, have a little bit of extra time on Netflix. Whereas if that was an amount of space where you could, a distance where you could reasonably do a nicer walk home and cut out that unpleasant car journey, and therefore think about your time and the makeup of your day and the importance of different sorts of experience.
Definitely. I very often used to walk to work, particularly when I was training to do my long trails. But that was when I lived about 3 miles away from the school I worked in. And I would very often walk or cycle, but usually walk if I was going to choose one or the other. And yeah, I loved that walk. And it took me, you know, through urban areas, but it also took me through some countryside. It took me through some ponds where there were some local urban ponds that was just like this haven in the middle of an urban area. And, you know, there's no reason why for an extra half an hour or 40 minutes, we can't establish that into our daily routine. And I think because time is money, we feel like we have to squeeze so much into our day in order to get the best value out of that day. And it's not always the case, and we end up being more stressed.
Even if you dash home so that you can do an exercise class or something, you know, it's not quite the same. There's something about walking. And for you, having that ongoing relationship with those ponds, you know, over the season, and having time which is not for anything, or that bagginess is missing, isn't it, in the time is money mentality?
Yes.
That bagginess of time and that slowness, slow ways, isn't it?
Slow ways. I love it. Well, we are coming to the end of the time that we've got available for our conversation, Hannah, and there's so much more that I wanted to touch on today, but we have the beauty of having another conversation you know, later on, where we can actually talk about, perhaps we can talk about the book in that conversation as well when we talk about the Wales Coast Path, because I think that will give those details of your life the time that it requires and that it deserves, really. Because I feel like this is a good time for us to wrap up, because
we've got right to the current. In fact, we've got to next weekend. Next weekend, and my big call to action: walk for us, walk with us.
Yes, and that's why I don't want to backtrack, because this is like the bit that leads on into next weekend. So, Hannah, where can people find out more about you first? What are your social media handles and website?
So seasidedonkey.co.uk, and there's a shop on there should anybody want to read the book or watch the film, or there's a digital shucks. There's such a place in my heart for all eternity for the 831 people who funded the crowdfunder. That was hardcore. Thank you.
That's all right. You're welcome.
It's also the book is also on Amazon. So, you know, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the big A.
The big A. So it is there as well. But if you buy it from me, I'll sign it.
And so people can get it from you via the website.
They can, yeah. So seasidedonkey.co.uk, and I'm also Seaside Donkey on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Or something like that, all of those. If you
we'll find
Seaside Donkey. Okay. And slowways.org.
Slowways.org. Okay. Yeah. And do people have to, if they want to walk, they want to join in the swarm next weekend, do they have to register? How do they go about doing that? Yeah, we
do. So if they find their way to the swarm page on the website, and I will make sure that is better linked to probably from the homepage and all of our social media bits and pieces, so they can register on there, and then we know what people are doing. But actually, I mean, if people just want to walk them, please don't let that be a barrier. The site itself will lead you through. There's also some YouTube videos of how-tos for people who are new to how to find a route. Download the route. You can download it as a GPX and then use it on the mapping app of your choice.
Great.
Or you can print out the route as well via the website. Then it'll show you through the reviewing process as well. So, which is all very unstressful.
Lovely. Well,
and also our Leeds, if anybody wants to come and meet us in Leeds, that would be super as well. And there's an Eventbrite link to sign up to Leeds, but it's free. It's just so that we know how many people. We're going to have tea and cake. We're going to have a bit of a kind of crafty, make your own map, kind of story map table as well, and a mini film festival as well.
Wonderful. And you need to know how much cake to make, don't you?
We need to know how much cake to make, exactly. And it's also Mother's Day, personally. And so we're particularly keen, me personally, exactly. Anybody who wants, the Sunday is Mother's Day, and the clocks change as well. So anybody who wants to make the most of that springy feeling and walk with their mother, anyone anywhere near Leeds, walk your mother to our Leeds get together and feed her our cake.
Oh,
we would be delighted.
That would be, yes. That is the ultimate destination, isn't it? Let's go for swarm cake.
Absolutely. Brilliant. And you'll meet a load of other people who are a little bit tired and jubilant.
Yes.
And also, one thing I haven't mentioned, I know that we're stopping, is the fact that a lot of people, we've been looking for the barriers to people walking, and one of the barriers that we hadn't particularly foreseen, especially with women, is not having somebody to walk with. So we're constantly looking for ways that we can put people in contact with each other, and coming to the get together, if you're anywhere near Leeds, would be one way to meet other people who are interested in walking and walking.
That's another tip for me, is all of these things are things that encourage women to get out there and try something different. And for some people, going out for a long walk or going out for a walk with other people is a different thing. It's something they've not done before.
We haven't talked about being middle-aged at all, have we?
No, we haven't.
We're far too busy.
We haven't talked about being middle-aged, and we haven't talked about demographics. I wrote down a little thing here about demographics, and I was thinking, gosh, I'm so intrigued about how Slowways has a plan to find out who their demographics are, the people that are walking their routes and using the routes. I mean, I know I'm going off on a tangent again, and we do have to stop in a moment, but I am just there's so many questions. But is that a plan? Do you think they will be able to tap into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So far, we ask people to sign up to the website so that you can save your routes and save way lists. And so that is something that we can definitely, it can be a data project, and that would be really useful. So far, we're mostly getting a sense of people from the people who are using social media. But we are aware as well of it being two things. One is that the tech can be a barrier to some people. So we're looking at how to make that less of a barrier. The idea of downloading a GPX file, some people are just not going to get any further than that straight away.
That could be gobbledygook to somebody.
Absolutely. And then also, even if you do know how to download a GPS, I've got a real aversion to using maps on my phone. I really don't like it. It messes with my sense of being in the world. And, as soon as you're looking at a phone, you're not looking at the world. So there's a number of things like that I'm really aware that we can think of ways to make it more appealing to people who are basically great big anachronistic Luddites like I am.
For me, it was just wondering if there was a plan to make sure that you were gathering that data. Demographics. So we're keen, the story element of my role, and I'm working together with a community storyteller and walker called Saira, who's also a renegade guide and is just absolutely fantastic at walking with people. And she's very quiet, and she's very self-contained and wonderful, and she walks with people and she just gets them and gets to the core of people and is able to help people tell their own stories. So I hope that as we start to we haven't got a stories channel quite yet. We've got a blog on the website, but we're building a stories channel, which hopefully will add to the tech side of the site. And what I'm really hoping is that when you write a review of a route, you don't feel like you're inputting data into a data project. You feel like you're leaving a note for the next person who's going to walk that route, and you feel like you're perhaps leaving memories on a site of it. In itself is a slow experience and a mindful experience. So it's really exciting working with tech, in a tech environment to try and bring these things about. But that analog tech tension is really exciting and interesting as well. I love that. Well, I am going to leave it there, Hannah, because if I ask you anything else, it's me. I'm full of exciting things there that I just want to jump on. But we can talk again, and we are going to talk again, which I am incredibly looking forward to. But Hannah Engelkamp, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. And yes, I shall look forward to the next time.
Great. Come for a walk.
Yes, definitely.
Fab.
Hannah is so fascinating, and I have been lucky enough to walk with Hannah a few days before Ursula Martin completed her 5,000-mile walk across Europe. Hannah, Ari Kane, and Ari was the first woman to run the Wales Coast Path and Offers Dyke, so she ran the perimeter of Wales back 10 years ago. Ursula's auntie and uncle and me, we all walked across the Radnor Hills together, and it was just lovely. So all those links that Hannah has mentioned will be in the show notes, and don't forget, the big swarm for Slowways happens this weekend. That's the 25th, 26th and 27th of March 2022. You can register a walk anywhere in the country, but if you're in Leeds, aim to get yourself to their swarm, tea and cake, map table and film festy meetup, because it sounds like it's going to be wonderful. Now, I had a message come through to me on Instagram just a couple of days ago, actually, from Karen, who is at Dorset for Days on Insta, and she also is part of at Fold Dorset. Fold is Folde Dorset, and they are a shop based in Shaftesbury in Dorset. And she's given me permission to share this message that she sent. She says, "Hi Zoe, hope all is good with you. I just wanted to say that I've begun listening to your podcast this week, and I'm loving it, in block capitals. You are a total natural. I'm binge listening to the previous episodes at the moment and finding so much that resonates. Brilliant stuff. Thank you." Now, I messaged Karen back and thanked her for that, and just let her know that it was perfect timing for me because I'd been on a little break for a while from the podcast, and that, you know, how easy it is to let yourself think that it's not reaching people, that it's only your friends and family listening. So yeah, I thanked her, and she said to me, "I'm so glad this has landed at a good time. I love podcasts and listen to a lot of them, but yours speaks to me in a very specific way, particularly as I've let some of my own adventuring lapse while I've been setting up my new business and then recovering from COVID. Recently, I've been racked with, probably perimenopausal, doubt that my body isn't up to it anymore. My joints ache like crazy at the moment. But you and your guests have inspired me to keep on keeping on. Keep up the good work, Zoe. I'll share the podcast on @Fold Dorset Stories too, as I think lots of our customers will enjoy it." So obviously I came back to Karen again and said, this is exactly the intention of the podcast, and it sounds like you've been going through all the similar stuff to me. Doubts, aches, busy life. We absolutely must keep on keeping on, despite it being difficult sometimes. And I was really fascinated. I've been following Fold Dorset's Instagram feed for quite a while, since they began, and she said, "We're definitely coming from the same place. Part of the purpose of Fold is to encourage a greater engagement with the outdoors, particularly among women who have been put off by the typical image of a Gore-Tex clad man climbing a mountain. We have lots of conversations in the shop about walking and wild swimming." And I just love that, how these conversations naturally unfold. So Fold is evolving, HeadRightOut is evolving, and I just wanted to share that really positive feedback from Karen, and hope that if you can perhaps take a moment to give HeadRightOut a 5-star review or get in touch with me like Karen did on social media, and then I can share that with other people too. It always warms my heart to hear first-hand feedback of how much you're enjoying the podcast and the impact it's having. And if we get reviews, 5-star reviews too, that helps me to reach the people that need to hear the podcast. Okay, that's it from me for a little while. I will be back with you again as soon as I can, as soon as things start to settle down here, and I really look forward to bringing you more conversations with resilient women. But until then, go and do something that pushes you out of your comfort zone. Something that you're going to enjoy, but something that you're going to feel really rewarded by. Something that you can write a letter to the grandkids and tell them all about. I hope you're enjoying the spring sunshine. Let's get out there and head right out. HeadRightOut hugs to you all. Mwah.